Okay, I think we should begin. It's been a little late. So, good morning, everyone. Welcome once again to another proposition. We have with us today Mareena Thomas, who is a graduate of the Sushant School of Art and Architecture, and she also teaches now at the Sushant School of Design as assistant professor. She has a master's in urban vision and architectural design from Italy. She describes herself as an architect by training at heart, and her research interests, which I think are very evident in her title, lie at the interests of the crossing of architecture and design, especially in urban graphics, moving exhibitions, festivalism, cities. The title of a proposition, which I have found very intriguing, and I'm really looking forward to it, Mareena, Assessing Community Responses of the Host City, a case of Kochi Muziris Biennale. So with that, over to you, Mareena.
Thank you so much, Radha ma'am. Good morning, everyone. Am I audible? Can you hear me? Okay, great. So I will just start my presentation, and while I'm presenting, I'm going to switch off my camera so that there are no connectivity issues.
Sure.
All right. Is my screen visible?
Yes, it's come up.
Great. Right. So I'm sure you all are now aware of my topic. It's called Assessing Community Responses of the Host City, and I'm going to be focusing. My primary study is focused on the Kochi Muziris Biennale. Before we get on to the details of the proposition and how I wish to take this research forward, I would like to just mention here that I'm still in the initial stage of research on this topic, although it is very close to my heart. But a lot of outcomes still remain unexplored, and I am looking to explore further. And I will try my best to convey my points here today so that I get a lot of feedback and some help on my journey towards improving my research. So, starting with the basic definition of a biennial, a biennale, which is the original Italian term, or biennale, as the Kochiites would call it, is something that happens once in every 2 years. And we are all well aware of the Venice Biennale. It's the most common one and the most well-known platform to showcase contemporary ideas and thoughts. We will come back. I'll come back to Venice Biennale and its history in a bit because it's important to understand the Biennale model and its origins. So my interest in such a topic, in this topic especially, came from my understanding of the impact that nomadic and moving biennales like the Manifesta have on the European cities that host it. So Manifesta is a moving biennale that moves around in different cities of Europe, and it doesn't stay in one location. It's not fixed. It is context based. The biennale focuses on molding the exhibition around the host city, and like I said, it does not have a fixed location. Um, the first manifesta was conducted in Netherlands, so it was very interesting to actually track the movement of manifesta through the years, starting with the first manifesta in Netherlands in 1996 and how it moved across Europe. It moves with the city's culture, its people, languages, and also the physical context of the city. Of course, it did encounter some problems along the way. And the most recent one, which was conducted in France, even with the pandemic in 2020. So the question that when such an event is over and it starts moving, it starts to move on to its next location, what does it really leave behind for the host city? Is it completely gone? Are there remains of it in the city? Does it leave anything behind? And what does it give back to its people? So coming back to the Venice Biennale and how it started. Why I'm talking about the Venice Biennale is because it dates back to more than 120 years ago, and it is important to understand the origins of this model and the various iterations of it that we see today. So the first Venice Biennale, only the one that happened in 1893, only had Italian art on display. Then by the next 2 years, we see in 1895 it gains traction and work of foreign artists is introduced. This is in 1895. Now this is a turning point because a new model is generated, a new platform for showcasing ideas emerges, and very soon we'll see that the entire world is starting to notice this change. They are all watching and they're learning. Now the 34th Biennale in 1968, on the first day, opens to student protesters and boycott slogans because the students believed that the Biennale model was an elitist commodification of art and they did not stand by it. So, of course, some loopholes along the way that now we are starting to encounter. And again, in the 35th one, there were problems at the political and organizational level of the Biennale Foundation, again revealing some loopholes in the model. And from 1972 onwards, it's starting to become more positive and more optimistic in spirit, and of course it has continued since then every 2 years to become what we know and appreciate today, the Venice Biennale model. Now in the gaps between these Venice Biennales, we see how different cities have also adopted the model. The Sao Paulo Biennale in 1951, Paris in 1959, and the Sydney Biennale in 1973. Like I said before, the world was watching and they were learning from this. Now, coming back and taking you to Kochi Muziris Biennale, which is the primary focus of my research. It is India's first Biennale model for showcasing contemporary art. The first one happened in 2012, and like the Venice Biennale model, we've had one every 2 years since then. Now, the location of Kochi is quite strategic. You all must be knowing that it is a coastal city in Kerala. It now sits at what was a very important harbor that had opened its gates to Arab and European merchants. And Kerala in total has 14 districts, and Kochi comes under the district of Ernakulam. And Fort Kochi is the primary venue of the Kochi Muziris Biennale. It faces the sea. It is a mix of different architectural styles and has many heritage structures. It has a lot of history in general. Now, talking about um, Muziris. Again, now Muziris is, or you can say, was an old harbor on the Malabar coast. It was known to be the heart of the spice route, very strategic location, and also was the doorway through which different cultures would enter India. This is how the Portuguese, the British even entered. It was like the doorway to India. It was also the spice emporium. It was the first emporium of India. Now, what connects both of these, Kochi and Muziris, is this Biennale that we have in common. And with this research, one of the primary questions that I'm trying to find answers to is this: how much of a Biennale is for the host city? And how well or how much is the community really responding to it? Are they responding to it? Is it for the people who are not from the host city, or is it leaving behind something for the host city? Is the Biennale being able to engage them and give back to them? How is the community engaging with it? The next set of questions that I'm trying to find answers to are what happens during the gap years in between biennales and how to measure its impact, really. What scale do we use to measure the community responses or the positive, negative impact of a biennale on its host city? So now, talking about the impact levels, there are many impact levels. One could assess how it affects the immediate surroundings. Fort Kochi, to be specific, which is the primary venue of the Biennale. One could also look at the impacts on the district, which is Ernakulam, the state, that is Kerala, the country, which is of course India, and the world at large. So, what kind of global connections are we making through the Biennale? But for this part of the research, the scope stays within Fort Kochi and Ernakulam. I'm hoping to look at these as well, but for now, these are the ones that I'm focusing on. Now, when it comes to the Biennale, it's not just the event that happens during those 1996 days. There are also some ancillary programs that happen that occur during the Biennale and also between the gaps of Biennales. For example, there is the Students Biennale, which was conceptualized by the Kochi Muziris Biennale Foundation in collaboration with the Foundation for Indian Contemporary Art and Foundation for Indian Art and Education. It was conceptualized as an international platform to showcase works of both BFA and MFA students in India. Now, what really happens through such an outreach is that art schools and the production of art is energized, and the students get a chance to expose themselves to a global platform. Then there are various residency programs that happen during the Biennale period, and it sort of opens up it allows artists from all sorts of disciplines to work and collaborate within a studio space, and these residency programs have different approaches and are completely based on public interaction and inquiry. Then there are workshops, tons of workshops conducted during the Biennale, before the Biennale, post Biennale. Something called the Let's Talk series, which again opens up opportunities for the artists who are participating in the Biennale, the curators of the Biennale, writers. It allows them to deliver talks, and this event also happens in between Biennales. So the gap between two Biennales is also utilized this way. Then we have something like the Artist Cinema, which is the film-oriented ancillary program of KMB, Kochi Muziris Biennale, and it showcases art films, documentaries, etc., from different parts of the world. This program in specific has brought attention to various topics through its choice of film screenings. Then again, to engage the community, the local community, there's something like ABC Art by Children, which conducts workshops across various schools in Kerala. So it's not just the local community that it's catering to, it's also the entire state. And it is supported by the government, and it aims at developing the arts education paradigm in India. Um, there's something known as Arts and Medicine, which is again an ancillary program. It focuses on the idea of using therapeutic music to provide relief to patients across hospitals. Again, they are working with the government of Kerala to make this happen, and this actually happens weekly. So there is a day that is fixed for this, like Wednesdays weekly. It happens at the various government hospitals, even during the gaps. Now, looking at the context-based initiatives taken up by the Kochi Muziris Biennale Foundation, there's this one called Art Rises for Kerala, or ARC, which is to bring together both Indian and international community in times of need, like when the floods hit Kerala. It was a very crucial time and difficult time for Kerala as a state, because it had to be rebuilt. There were a lot of things that were destroyed, and Kerala at this point was in a very weak position. Now, the auction that happened for Art Rises for Kerala, raised around 3 crores to be donated to the CM Relief Fund, both for immediate relief and to rebuild the damaged state. So, again, engaging the community in a way that is helping the state and also creating awareness. Another example of community engagement comes from Chendamangalam Handloom Sarees. Now, Chendamangalam again is an example of a local engagement uh, method, because it comes under again the same district that Kochi Muziris happens in. It's the same district, Ernakulam, and it's known for its handloom saris. It was completely destroyed during the floods, and the Chekuti dolls were made using whatever leftover fabric, the remains that were left over after the floods washed everything away. The Chekuti dolls were made out of that and were sold at the Biennale to raise funds again for flood relief. Um, Another context-based initiative is Kudumbashri. Now, Kudumbashri is in Malayalam, it means prosperity of the family, and it's another example of community engagement, community strengthening. It's a women empowerment program, and they had set up a cafe that functioned all day at Cabral Yard, one of the important public links to the Biennale. Again, it's in partnership with the government of Kerala, raises awareness, creates promotion opportunities for the initiative. Just some last few points here. When we talk about impacts and the response of such an event and how do we assess them, we need to understand that there are different kinds of impacts that one may encounter. One could be the socio-cultural impact. One could be the economic impacts that an event like this can have on the local community. Then there is also the physical impacts that we could look at um, when we talk about the community responses. So coming to the socio-cultural impacts, I've just listed down a few. There are many more, but I've listed down a few of them here. Something like enhanced exposure to local artists. What happens through these events is that many local artists get invited to showcase their works at different biennales around the world based on their performance or exhibits in the Kochi Muziris Biennale. So it's creating a platform, it's broadcasting their talents to the entire world, and they're being noticed. Um, Another socio-cultural impact could be that Kochi becomes a cultural center. Now, the Kochi Muziris Biennale over time has been successful at triggering the interest of Indian as well as global artists towards Kochi, which has helped in positioning itself as a cultural center in our country. Another socio-cultural impact could be the inbound tourism. So there has been a growth in inbound tourism for the state. There have been studies and surveys conducted about the growth of tourism, and there has been a spurt of domestic as well as international tourists in Kerala after the first Kochi Muziris Biennale in 2012. And many local businesses and vendors also claim to have witnessed growth in business during the Biennale and also after. Um, Another very important socio-cultural impact could be the restoration of abandoned spaces and buildings in the city. So various venues that host the Biennale have been now re-energized and reimagined as a consequence of the event. Some of them were, initially they were abandoned warehouses used by the British, Portuguese, and the Dutch traders. For example, the Pepper House, it was an old warehouse complex, was renovated for the Biennale, and it now houses a visual arts library, a gallery, cafe, studios for resident artists, in addition to providing spaces for events. So there are these examples that we keep witnessing across Fort Kochi, um, examples of restoration. The Aspen Wall house, this is the Aspen Wall house, which had been shut for years and has been revived now. Its original frontage was actually designed to impress merchants who were traveling on the spice route, and it has now been reimagined as the primary venue for the Biennale. So Aspen Wall house is now where the main exhibits are, where the main exhibits happen, and is one of the primary locations of the Biennale. The event also sort of puts Kochi on the world's cultural map. Um, it allows for these exchanges and engagements between local and international artists, which becomes very important um, for the city, and it also helps broadcast the already existing heritage and history of the city. So the history and heritage that was maybe till now unexplored, unknown, is now being broadcast, and it can now reach. There is an outreach that is happening. Along with socio-cultural, there are also economic impacts that will help us understand the event better. Um, One of the economic impacts obviously will be job creation. It always happens when there is an event, and it sort of helps in reviving a city. Jobs are created when there are artists involved, especially because they will need people to help with production. They will need people to help with setting up. They need volunteers. The event requires volunteers. They do um, have such programs for especially created for volunteers to coordinate the event, and this also helps in community engagement. Then there is tourism and again transport, which is obviously revived when and there's a growth in both of these. I've already highlighted the points before, so I'm not going to repeat them. And last but not least, the physical impacts of the Kochi Muziris Biennale. So when we talk about physical impacts, of course, there's the morphological impact, which the impact of uh, the impact on the physical structure of Fort Kochi begins with the venues for the Biennale itself, all of which are very, very carefully chosen. There are the spaces such as the Aspen Wall house, which we just saw, the David Hall, the Pepper House also that we just saw. They were identified in Fort Kochi. They were they were identified through thorough research and then were transformed into venues for exhibiting art. And these restorations led to an appreciation of the old, the decaying, dying, and it sort of opened up to the community these new ideas on restoring old structures in a very sensitive manner. Then there's the visual uh, impact on the physical physical aspect of this. Morphological changes will of course somewhere lead to visual changes as well, and that is quite visible in Fort Kochi area, because there are these smaller spaces too, such as cafes, that have now become very conscious in their aesthetics and their look and feel, and all of them seem to infuse the spaces with some form of art. And there also seems to be a change in the way public spaces are now used after this artistic invasion of the Biennale. And some sort of a placemaking initiative for the city has happened. And these are just some of the impacts. Of course, there are many, many more yet to be explored. And that is all from me. Thank you. I would love to get some feedback and help on my way forward with my research. I know that it's a very short presentation and still lots to do in this area.
Can I request you one more thing? Can I come in?
Sure, sir.
Could you little bit talk about the organizational structure of this Biennale?
Right. So, sir, right. I have not gone into the details of the organizational structure of the Biennale. I should have. But it did start in 2012. It was started by Bose Krishnamachari, and there have been a lot of inputs from various artists and designers for the Kochi Muziris Foundation. It is still gaining traction as it's moving along, and I know that I'm going to work on that part and add the details of the organizational structure.
Okay. Thanks, Mareena. Anyway, thank you for that, taking us through I've been wanting to go for many years, and I was actually thinking of the impact also that places like the Jaipur Literature Festival. I mean, there's so many of these models which they have, which I'm personally more familiar with. And I was just wondering about, because they always claim that, oh, JLF is what does makes the city, and of course that's not true. I mean, Jaipur has a vibrant thing on its own. But
Right.
any other yeah, sorry, are there any
I
questions?
can come in because if I may,
Yes, yes.
because hi Mareena. I think it was
Thank
a very good, what I may call an expose of, or maybe just an introduction of Kochi Muziris. I think it's connected to what Professor Savra hinted at, the organizational structure, and to identify the claims that it makes. And if it doesn't make a claim of,
Absolutely.
community engagement, then where is this angst coming from? And also, I think you must be aware that you set up really strong binaries of positive and negative impact. You talk about community in terms of them and us. So just be mindful of the way you're describing these binaries, and whether you really intend to, or these are creeping in from somewhere else. What is the source of these binaries? And as you know, I mean, do you want to, I would think, I was reflecting on uh, your focus on positive and negative impact, and I think that's a very, very dangerous territory to kind of really you know um, uh, really separate the influences into the positive and negative. But because as something that is positive to the community may be a negative to the
Absolutely.
Biennale. So do you want to do that, or you want to look for other vocabulary? Maybe social and cultural influences, I was thinking, was a much more meaningful and gentle way of seeing what what are the kind of outcomes of this initiative. um, and also, is there a manifesto of the Biennale? I mean, that is also something related to, say, the organizational structure. And where
Right.
do they publish this manifesto? How many people know about it? What is the
Right.
notion of this presence of the manifesto itself in the society? How is it disseminated? And I think that uh, it then comes to the question again. It's a cyclical argument in a way, but it comes to again to the question, who is the audience here? How have they imagined
Yep.
the audience? Because all the visual material that you've shown, whether it's the Kutumbashri, whether it's interesting that these exotic Kerala Malayali words are used to kind of flag, but rest of the material is in English. And whether it is, what is the notion of that engagement of the material of the initiatives that comes in this kind of package of aesthetic sensibility that may or may not appeal to it's not, maybe forget appealing, it's not meant for the local community, it's meant for a global stage perhaps. um, and which is very clear from from even the Aspen Wall that you showed, the
Right.
whole graffiti, very controlled, managed graffiti on the wall is in English, and who's reading it, and how and why, and where is it disseminated? So I think it's such an interesting topic, and I congratulate you for picking this up. And there are so many layers that you can excavate, and I'm sure you can thoroughly enjoy engaging with it. So these were some of my observations.
Thank you so much, ma'am. I completely agree with what you just said about the Aspen Wall House. Also, the text that's written so boldly and so well in English. And it was even originally when the Aspen Wall House um, was shut for so many years. There is a history that takes us back to why the Aspen Wall House was built like that. It was heavily decorated to actually attract merchants who were traveling and were on their way on the spice route. So is it still doing what it used to do before? And is it only for them? The them and us again comes back. Yes, but yes, is it for us? Is it for them? Who is it for really, and how much of it is for the people who are hosting it? Is again the same question. Yes.
I want to add something here. This is
Yes,
Shashi
sir.
here. I think you can see me. Yeah.
Yes,
So
yes.
I've been visiting the Biennale, I think 3 times now. And what I found is that it's slowly becoming an event that everybody connects from different parts of society. Initially, it was probably something which was more limited to the art world, and especially the people who came from outside to see it specifically, because it is also, Fort Cochin is also you can say, the touristic hub of Kerala. Everybody goes to uh, Fort Cochin, and there's a culture around tourism which is developed there, which is in its own way, in the buildings and in the cafes and in the things that happen around there. So it cashing in on that, I think the Biennale was located very well initially, but in the last twice that I've gone, I have seen that there are people from other parts of Kerala who are coming specifically, especially school children, for example. I've seen bus loads of school children go through, spend the whole day going around there. People from all walks of life, not only from locally, from the area, but also from further areas coming to visit that. Now, what they actually are making out of it, that is a question that needs to be answered, because we don't know what is the exact interaction that's happening at a subliminal level. But at the same time, the scale of it and the kind of installations and all which are usually put up by different artists in different places, it creates a certain interest that is beyond just viewing of art. There is an engagement that happens. I've seen that because I do overhear conversations between people when I'm there. I try to hear those things. What are they saying? So it's very interesting to see that there is an engagement that has started probably in the last 2 biennales, I would say. I mean, the last one I went to was the one which I think it was 2019. Yeah. 2000 there was one in 2019, right?
The one that started in 2018 and continued till.
Yeah, that one. Yeah, I went for that. Was after that it's not happened. So obviously this year it's not happened.
Yes, it has not happened.
Yeah.
Right. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Professor Menon. Wonder if there are any other questions or observations for Mareena on the Biennale in general, or any new areas that she could tap into, perhaps?
Can I come in?
Yes, sir, please.
No, this is very interesting as a topic. But when you sort of get into kind of a research about this, I think you have to get into the entire subject in a very objective manner. Are you from Cochin?
No, sir, I'm not.
Okay. Because I would be, why I asked you about the organizational structure. Because in that really lies the substance for you to examine about various goals of Biennale. And whether these goals are something, which are emerging out of the needs of the community there, or is it something, which is coming out of the group, which is interested in exploring or exploiting that location for their own interest. I mean, this is very important to understand.
Absolutely, yes.
Because when you really talk about, community engagement into art and expositions of the art, I think it's a subject, which has to be really seen very objectively. I have not seen, Kochi Biennale. I have not been there, but I have been to Venice. And there is a kind of interesting correlation between Venice and Kochi, because both were extremely merchant-oriented places. And that's perhaps one reason why these kind of initiatives are, finding, meaning in these kind of locations. You see, because it attracts a lot of foreigners, it attracts a lot of buyers for art, and it also attracts, the artists, simply for the reason of survival. So I think the whole purpose of organizational structure is very important for you to examine as an objective, sort of research. And if you feel that these locations are selected with, this kind of, sort of goal also, then would the community representation be there in the organizational structure of this Biennale? Which also is a big question. So, for example, Venice Biennale, I was there in 2018, and it was just being held. Now there also, they have actually used the arsenal, which was a military establishment,
Yes.
which is really converted into the exhibit area.
Exhibition space. Yeah, right.
And they have also added new structures in the garden. The whole thing is known as gardenia. So I think, or giardenia in Italian, and this is where, off the season, when the Biennale is not there, it has become a fantastic place for the local students, to be there. And when I was there, I think it was just sort of happening. And it had really almost over. But the kind of, facilities that they had really developed in that area, was fabulous, for the students. So I think you could virtually feel that everything was still going on, But I was told that this is a usual atmosphere here because these university students flood it, because there is so much of facility provided for the students, which they can use for their own purposes, you see. So this is also something, which tells you how these kind of exposition areas, when they are not sort of all the time functioning, become part of the community, of different interests, you see. And, there are some permanent exhibits, which are there,
Yes.
which are in the country-wise pavilions, So this is something, which I feel as a kind of important topic of the research, you will have to get in. I mean, that is what my impression is. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you, Professor. I was also at the Venice Biennale of 2018, so I remember when you say the permanent exhibitions and how they've now sort of become part of that urban fabric of Venice. It's very important to explore more about that and its connection with the Kochi Muziris Biennale with respect to the location and the strategic advantages that the location gives to the Biennale. It's very important to explore that as well.
Also, the organizational structure of
Right.
Biennale.
Absolutely. Yes.
You must
Right.
have seen, if you've seen it, you must have read about it, because that's a fantastic, integration of all parts of society in it, So I think as a kind of, cross-cultural comparison with similar goals, I think it could be a good case study for you to sort of depend. And that is the oldest one,
Absolutely. Yes. Thank you. Thank you, Professor.
Hi, Mareena, I think there are a few questions in the chat from Ekta. She's just a comment, I guess, about choice of venues, and she talks about whether the fact that they're around water. Is there a connection that may have a connection to what Professor Vasavra just said about trade
Yes.
and
Merchant routes. Yes.
and
Yes.
trade routes?
Merchant destinations.
And Tanvi Manglik has said maybe you could look at the Triennale de Milano and Milan Furniture Fair.
Yes.
And Professor Menon is saying that the exact location of the original Muziris is still a matter of debate Is it?
Yes, it is. It is. It is. It's a lost city. You could call it a lost harbor or something that is debatable, because it suddenly vanished from the map, and there are still debates happening around the exact location of Muziris. But that's, I think, the beauty of it.
Probably,
The-
probably because I think there was some flood or something like that, which that's what I
Yes.
know, that it sort of got washed out, and then the mouth of the river sort of changed, and
Yes.
that sort of thing. So
That's how. Yeah, we have the harbor that is
yeah,
there today. Yes.
The biggest danger now is the development of the new harbor, which is coming just across, and I think this is
Yes.
going to threaten Kochi. And I think Professor Ravindran has done a very detailed study on this, which I've seen. So Fort
Sure.
Kochi is really under a threat, right now. So this
It is.
is
There are
something,
many plans. Yes, yes, to revive the city. There are many
yeah.
initiatives that are being taken up. Also, Muziris is part of a huge restoration project that's going on in partnership with the government of Kerala. So yes, it's important to connect that as well. I will explore that. Also, Tanvi, so I can see Tanvi's comment that I could look at Triennale di Milano and the Milan Furniture Fair. So how these events are different from Biennales is that the Biennale happens once in every 2 years, and also it is in a fixed location, but there is a different when it happens every year and when it happens once in every 2 years, there is a lot more preparation that goes into it. I think this is one of the major differences, and that the Biennale has these different various countries participating, and it's a platform to showcase what the country has been doing in that gap of 2 years. So yes, I will definitely look into that, and thank you.
I was wondering, Mareena, if there were examples, local examples, pre-19th century examples of community initiatives that were to do with artistic production, local artistic production, and their dissemination, or were there forums that I know? Is Sarfoji from Kerala? Sarfoji is this great collector. I don't know the details, but he was a king who collected a lot of things and was the kind of the local counterpart of a museum, and so were there initiatives that were pre-19th century? And also I think Biennale, the longer gaps you give does not necessarily mean more prepared you are. Of course, I mean, it's about creating a pulse. So festivals are held, there's a seasonal pulse, there's a yearly pulse, there's a whatever. So what I think it is more to do with connecting with the Italian world, rather than saying, oh, we need 2 years so that we can do a better job at it. Well, take 6 then. I don't think it's necessarily to do with it's the vocabulary. So again, whether your objective of analyzing the community impact is well founded or not. I mean, if it's not in the manifesto, then it doesn't. It doesn't make sense that you chase after a musk deer. So.
I also feel that this idea of community impact, Marina, and this
Yes.
idea of production is something that one needs to look at from what's happening behind the scenes, not as a
So the
resultant.
foundation. Yeah.
Yeah, not as a resultant of so such and such episode took place, so what happened to the community. But as a resultant of these are the processes of production that got put into place. This is how transcultural knowledge and understanding sort of merged while the production was taking place, because you're talking about that aspect more than the visual aspect in that case. So I think it's
Right.
important to bring those production processes in place, linked to the idea of organization and all of that. I mean, the organizational structure, who are the people who converge to make the space? And what are those, who are those, even labor? Who's the labor? Who comes together? Where do they come from? And what is the knowledge set that they bring into the community? And hence, how does that develop the community sort of interaction or processes? I think it's that whole background is more important to study, the backstage. So it might help you connect these ideas a little bit more, is what I feel.
Right. Thank you.
Yes, I think that's it. Through all these conversations, there is that thread, backstage. And Amrita's
Behind the scenes.
hit the nail. Yeah, it's behind the stage work that needs to be exposed to see, how one gets from there to the actual delivery.
Right. Also to understand the true intention of the foundation of the Biennale.
So I also have a comment from Tapasya, who says that Benny Kyrikos has actually worked for years on the Muziris Heritage Project, and suggests that you might try connecting.
Sure, I will.
His work, and it seems to be well researched.
I will. Thank you.
Yeah. That moment of pause where maybe people are mulling over.
I have another filler if just
yes,
to fill the pause.
Right.
You may also want to look at the architectural baggage it carries, the vernacular, the soft side, they'll not use concrete, for example, or, they won't use plastic, and all this kind of, sensitivity. What is the root of this? And it is a, contemporary package of what sells globally. I mean, I'm not suggesting it's right or wrong, but that, there is a certain aesthetic package that has huge global traction and, sustainability. And in the name of that, a lot of stuff goes on, which you might want to enjoy.
So right. So I wanted to explore that part of how and why a biennale happens in decaying structures or structures that maybe it's the fascination with decay and dying structures, or it's something else. Again, a common point between the Venice Biennale and the Kochi Biennale. But I like I said, I initially wanted to start with that, but I don't know how. I just took a different route. I will definitely come back to that part of this research.
Sorry.
No, please go ahead, Professor Visavo. Please go ahead.
No, I was also wondering if one examines the initial goals, of the foundation, how Kerala features into this, the culture of Kerala. Because in a sense, if you see, even if you talk of architecture, I think Kerala has some of the most important examples of architecture, which are deeply rooted, For example, circular temples you never find anywhere else. But there are sort of carry forwards of, our ancient traditions, Kerala and Nepal are two places, where you really find deep rooted, principles in architecture also. So art, for example, the martial art, for example. I mean, would Biennale include, different forms of artistic presentations or just visual? I think this is why, I feel it is very important to, at the beginning, examine the goals of the foundation. Because then that is when you will really understand what is the intent, of selecting this place. Or is it simply because Kerala is famous for tourism,
Yes.
So how does one decide? I mean, is it simply from the point of view of tourism attraction, which it globally has? But if the theme is God's own country, then how it is really materializing, in terms of expression. So I think there is a lot you can really research, which perhaps even can give further directions to Biennale, I mean, I really look at this study from that point of view, because nobody must have really done this kind of a research, before really getting onto this, or the kind of research that they have done is from a very different viewpoint. But it is very important to examine this, you see, because you talk at one place about art and medicine, Now, this is a whole area of connections with our ancient culture, So I think this is where I think Kerala has a very prominent position in a sense. So there is a lot one can think about when you are really doing a research. And when this kind of biennales become some kind of, tools to display, much more globally than what is normally just known, as art.
Right. Point well taken, Professor.
I was holding back, but maybe I may just say it. I don't know if you are looking at it, but it is related to what Professor Vasavda started off, like the idea of if there is inherently some cultural inclination towards such an activity. But we've always debated whether exposing very young, children to a particular kind of aesthetic sense or palette. I mean, I'm sure this Biennale brings a lot of graphics, it brings a lot of art to probably, if not streets, then this accessibility to this aesthetics and graphics and color and composition and the dialogue around this between artists and other critics. It is coming to the city. I mean, I'm not sure if you're looking in this direction, but does it actually change in the long run how people embrace creative professions, or does it change their aesthetic sense? I don't know if there is a quantifiable value here, or if this is sort of very long shot, because we've always debated if certain cultures have a certain kind of aesthetic sense because of what they already see throughout their life, or they have access to rather, or have seen it commonly, or is it not? Is it not dependent on that? Is it not? Is the creative instinct of a person not dependent on what they have been exposed to? Maybe one of the questions that I would have thought when
comes there and then takes that knowledge and creates a sort of memory of that place. And through that memory, I've seen even visitors coming and generating art in a different way associated with that. Even production, going back again to the processes of production. So workers from all over the country converge to this place for a month to produce this place, and that intense knowledge sharing that takes place, and how these people they come in and they get embedded into the society, into that locals, because the locals know ye agle saal bhi aayenge. They come every year, and then they are a part of their the social setups. Things start moving, they start living in their colleagues' houses, and an alternate sort of transient community gets created through these and the intent is very simple. It's a B2B exhibition, but what happens in that whole background is so interesting to observe how these exchanges start taking place. So this idea of that international pavilions that you're saying. So how those sort of sensibilities get now absorbed by the people of that place, and how that is now implicating how they see this place now. They see the place differently. They design for it. They work for it differently. They design for it differently. Ideas of safety, secure. So many things get merged into that. It's a package, and its impact comes across from so many years. So it's just something that it's really exciting to actually see that. So I'm just putting it there. Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah, it's definitely important and interesting to look at that. Draw parallels between the two.
Yeah, listening to you speak, I mean, I was familiar with the Jaipur Literature Festival for, it seems to have the same or similar. I mean, of course, it's not an art festival, but it's, in terms of where it's located and the way in which it sort of creates these layers of, I mean, they say economic opportunity, but then also the architecture and, all this, everyone converging in for this period of time. And then, I really don't know what
And
happens in between. It's interesting to see
right.
that what happens to Diggy
That
Palace.
is, yes, that is one
So
of the
what is
questions.
interesting, Radha, what you raise is interesting because, I mean, of course, one could also map other festivals, but Jaipur Literary Festival have been, in a way connected with the founding team, which was, long back. And, their intention was not to include, so much the local community. They wanted a global presence. And having had that, the sudden angst of, where is Hindi literature, for example? And then having had Hindi literature, where is Dhundari literature? So you see what I mean? So after you get traction and publicity, and then of course criticisms will flow in, and then the gaps become more and more visible once your identity solidifies. As long as it's nebulous and it's founding nascent stages, it doesn't matter much, I guess. But these gaps. But what it also suggests that there is this polarity between what community wants and what these outfits. So there is a division perhaps in the society itself, or that there are several communities, not one. And I mean, the fact that they can be so insular is fantastic, but bizarre.
No, but if we discuss this on a general level, this kind of polarization or this kind of, sort of separation between what is folk and what becomes mainstream has always existed in all arts. I mean, even if you look at architecture, I think what we in the mainstream call as architecture is so different from what is followed traditionally, and there are two parallel schools here, right? But they are never brought together, at any point, So, this is our sort of, you know, uh, sort of condition, because I think there was something, which was colonially influenced, and because there was something which was carrying on the traditional systems, could never sort of be seen as, equals, because what was followed through colonialism and what was followed through Western ideas was considered to be more progressive than the other one, So I think, if these biennales are also really considered as some kind of folk festivals, or if they have some kind of a room for folk festivals, I think then it serves the combined purpose, because then it becomes a kind of common platform to share and to bring these things together. And, this is what would be somehow needed. And the biggest problem which the folk is finding today is of the patronage, because I think patronage is something, which is very fast, sort of depleting and even when you talk of these folk, the way they are used today is to somehow, cater to the popular needs. And you see their whole production process is now getting geared to somehow satisfy these kind of conditions. So, they are also losing meaning, from their own art, because the art, which they were practicing for each family's own purpose is now getting into a kind of commercial processes, So I think there are so many such, overlapping ideas and debates, which one can really bring into focus as a general discussion, leaving aside for time being the Biennale. But what is the need of our community? What is the need of our society to somehow get this kind of ideas of exposition in a way that it virtually revives the entire community together and not really once again exist in these two polarities, which remain constantly isolated. For example, Kerala also has, I mean, in all forms of art, I think Kerala used to excel, For example, in terms of even a new renaissance, for example, what was started by Ravi Verma, I mean, Ravi Verma's house, his family, everything is there, you see. And I think one should also look at this, you see. So how much this idea is somehow replenished by the local awareness is something, which needs to be somehow discussed in these kind of studies, you see, because I think then that can be a kind of pointer, Biennale as such could be a kind of starting point. But then how this kind of Biennale could be different for us is something, which I think one has to really point out through these kind of studies, you see. That is what I feel. I don't know.
Yeah, possibly, yes. Okay. Any closing remarks? I think I should probably try and start nudging people towards, because it's past 10. I know people have left already because of class, and some of us are due to start soon. But thank you so much, Mareena, for taking us on this journey. And, look forward to actually, further work as you progress.
Yeah.
And, look forward to hearing more. Yeah.
Absolutely, yes. I look forward to share more. Yes, I know it was a very short presentation. I tried to keep it very short and only talk about the main points. But yes, there's still a lot which is left unexplored by me. And thank you for your feedback, comments.
Thank you,
I'm
everyone.
sorry, I closed. I'm sorry.
That's fine. All right. Thank you, everyone, for joining. And thanks once again to the team. And we'll be seeing you all in 2 weeks. We have a presentation from Preetha Sajin in 2 weeks from now. So that'll be on the 19th of March. All right. Thanks a lot. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Bye-bye.